In the summer of 1914, a car took a wrong turn down a narrow side street. The driver realized his mistake and stopped to reverse. The stop lasted only a few seconds, but by the time that car moved again, the heir to an empire was dying in the back seat, and the deadliest war the world had ever seen was already certain. This is the story of those few seconds. It is the story of how an assassination plot that had already failed was given a second chance by a single wrong turn, and of how the world we live in now was shaped by what happened next. The heir was Archduke Franz Ferdinand, nephew of the aging Emperor of Austria-Hungary and the next man in line to one of the great thrones of Europe. In June 1914, he traveled to Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia. Bosnia had been brought under Austria-Hungary's control only a few years earlier, and many of its people did not want to be ruled from Vienna. For a Serbian nationalist, the visit of the empire's heir was not a ceremony. It was a target. There is an irony here that the men hunting him did not know. Franz Ferdinand was not loved by the court in Vienna. He was difficult, stubborn, and married to a woman the imperial family considered beneath him. But he was also, by the standards of that empire, something close to a reformer. He believed its many peoples, including its restless South Slavs, needed a greater voice, not a heavier boot. Some historians argue that the nationalists in Sarajevo killed the one powerful man who might have given them part of what they wanted. The men who waited for him were young. Several were still teenagers. They belonged to a movement of Bosnian Serbs who believed the empire's rule should be ended by violence. They had been given pistols and bombs by contacts tied to a secret society inside Serbia. On the morning of June 28, 1914, they spread out along the route the Archduke's motorcade would take, each one waiting for his moment. The first attempt came in the late morning. As the motorcade drove along the river, one of the conspirators threw a bomb at the Archduke's open car. It struck the folded roof, bounced away, and rolled under the car behind. The explosion tore into that second car and wounded the officers inside. But Franz Ferdinand himself was untouched. His driver accelerated, and the motorcade raced away to safety. And here the plot fell apart. The other conspirators were still in position along the route, but the cars now came past them too fast, or hemmed in by too many people, and one after another the men lost their nerve and did nothing. The motorcade reached the town hall. The Archduke was shaken, but alive. The plan to kill him had failed completely. One of those assassins was a 19-year-old named Gavrilo Princip. Believing the day was over and the plot was dead, he left his position. He walked off the main avenue, onto a quiet side street, and stopped near a small shop. A famous version of the story says he had paused there to eat a sandwich. That detail is almost certainly a later invention. What is certain is simpler. The plot had failed, and Gavrilo Princip had given up and walked away. At the town hall, the welcome ceremony went ahead, but the mood had broken. Franz Ferdinand was visibly shaken and angry. He had come to the city as a guest, and someone had just tried to kill him and his wife in the street. The prepared speeches suddenly felt hollow. And out of that anger came the decision that would kill him. Franz Ferdinand chose to change his schedule. He would go to the hospital to visit the officers wounded by the bomb. It was, on its own, a decent and human choice. A new route was agreed, but in the confusion of the morning, one thing was missed. Nobody clearly told the drivers. So the motorcade set off again, and within moments it went wrong. The lead driver had not been told about the new route. Following the original plan from earlier that day, he turned the car off the main avenue and onto a side street. It was the wrong way. The cars behind him followed, because that is what cars in a motorcade do. In the Archduke's car, the governor of the province saw the mistake and called out for the driver to stop. The driver obeyed. He brought the open car to a complete halt on the narrow street so he could reverse and rejoin the proper route. For a few seconds, the most important man in the Austro-Hungarian Empire sat motionless in an open car on a street he was never meant to be on. And on the pavement of that street, only steps away, stood Gavrilo Princip. An hour earlier, he had believed it was finished. He had given up, walked away from the river, and come to rest near a small shop on this quiet side street. Now he looked up, and the impossible was sitting in front of him. The open car, the uniform, the face from every poster in the city. Stopped. Still, Princip did not hesitate for long. He stepped off the pavement, toward the car and raised his pistol. He fired twice at point-blank range. The first shot struck Franz Ferdinand in the neck. The second struck his wife Sophie, who had sat beside him all through that long day. Neither of them could be saved. Within minutes, on that side street, both were dead. It is worth stopping on this exact moment, because everything that follows grows out of it. The killing of Franz Ferdinand is remembered as the cause of the First World War. But the killing itself was no unstoppable plan. It happened because a driver took a wrong turn and stopped his car in the one place in the world where it must never have stopped. The largest catastrophe of the modern age was unlocked by one of the smallest mistakes a person can make. Gavrilo Princip was seized on the spot. He was 19 years old. Under the law of Austria-Hungary, that was too young for the death penalty. So the man whose shots would help kill millions could not himself be executed. He was sentenced instead to 20 years in prison. He died there of illness 4 years later in 1918, while the war he had helped to start was still being fought. What happened after the shots was not an accident. It was a machine. Austria-Hungary blamed Serbia for the killing and sent it a list of harsh demands, written to be almost impossible to fully accept. Germany promised to stand behind Austria-Hungary, whatever it chose to do. When Serbia's reply was judged insufficient, Austria-Hungary declared war, and then the alliances did what alliances do. Russia began to mobilize its army to defend Serbia. Germany declared war on Russia, and then on Russia's ally, France. To strike at France quickly, German troops marched through Belgium, and that drew in Britain. In a little over 5 weeks, 2 pistol shots on a side street had become a war between most of the great powers of Europe. The war did not end quickly, the way many in 1914 had expected. It lasted more than 4 years. By the time it was over, around 20 million people were dead, soldiers and civilians together. It had brought down 4 empires: the Austro-Hungarian, the Russian, the German, and the Ottoman. The map of Europe and the Middle East was redrawn. An entire world had ended. Now an honest question has to be asked. Could 2 shots in Sarajevo really cause all of that on their own? The honest answer is no. Europe in 1914 was already dangerous. Its great powers were bound into rival alliances, locked in an arms race, and led by men who half expected a war, and in some cases, half wanted one. The continent was, in an often used phrase, a powder keg. But a powder keg does not explode on its own. It needs a spark. For more than 100 years, historians have argued about whether this war was truly inevitable, and they argue still. Yet, inevitable or not, the war did not begin in the abstract. It began on a specific morning, on a specific street, because one car stopped in the wrong place. The powder had been waiting for years. The wrong turn struck the match. There is something in this story that is hard to sit with. We want large events to have large causes. It feels right that a war which killed 20 million people should begin with something huge, something equal to the scale of the suffering. It is much harder to accept that it can begin with a wrong turn. But history, again and again, refuses to hand us causes that match the size of their effects. It keeps its hinges small. The driver who took that turn was not a villain. He made the kind of small mistake that every person makes on some ordinary day, with no consequence at all. Almost always, a wrong turn is nothing. You notice it, you correct it, you drive on, and you have forgotten it by evening. This one happened in the wrong city, in the wrong minute, in front of the wrong man, and so it became the most expensive mistake in human history. That side street in Sarajevo still exists. People walk down it every day, most of them never knowing what it once cost the world. And the unsettling thing the street leaves you with is not really about 1914 at all. It is about every order that feels solid and permanent right now. The peace we live inside feels like a fixed and natural fact. So did the peace of that bright June morning in the last few minutes before a car took a wrong turn.